I don't even remember applying for the job. That's the weirdest part. I'd been looking for work, sure, something quiet, something far from people, but this posting just showed up. One moment, I was browsing classifieds at 3 a.m., and the next, I was staring at a plain listing. Gravekeeper needed remote church property. Must be comfortable working alone. Lodging provided. Cash weekly. Inquire by phone only. No name, no address. Just a number. I called it. A man's voice answered on the second ring. Raspy.com. You'll start on Monday, he said. Come before sunset. And that was it. The church was far farther than I expected. GPS couldn't find it. The last half hour of the drive, I was just following handwritten directions from the voice on the phone. Paved roads gave way to cracked dirt paths. Cell signal vanished. Ties past rotting barns, collapsed fences, whole fields overgrown with weeds and rusted machinery. The kind of landscape that feels like it never recovered from something. I remember the way the trees started to lean in as I got closer, gnarled like they'd been strangled by their own roots. The world grew quieter. Not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no bugs, no bugs. Just wind that didn't seem to move anything. When I finally pulled up to the church, I had to double-check that it wasn't abandoned, that it was old. Gothic in design, black stone walls streaked with years of weather and moss. Vines coiled up the sides like veins, creeping toward the bell tower. That tower stood tall, leaning slightly to the left, and no matter how hard I stared, I swear, the bell inside moved. Just a little. The graveyard wrapped around the building like a Montrose upon rows of perfect, untouched graves. The headstones were immaculate. No dirt mounds, no signs of recent digging. Just grass, smooth and flat like a golf course. Too flat, too. Staged. Before I could even step out of the car, someone opened the front doors. The priest. He didn't smile, didn't wave. Just stared with pale eyes like glass marbles, sunken into a face that looked embalmed. His robes hung stiff, like they'd been untouched by wind for years. You're the new keeper, he said, not a question. I nodded. He handed me a small, yellowed envelope. Read these before nightfall. You'll be staying in the caretaker's loft above the bell tower. Meals are delivered to your door. You do not need to enter the church unless instructed. His voice was cold, mechanical, not unfriendly, just emptied out, like someone had drained the person out of him long ago. I glanced down at the envelope. Rules. Of course there were rules. The caretaker's loft was small bare wood, single bed, old oil lamp, and a window that looked directly out onto the graveyard. The silence up there was heavier than outside. Swear I could feel it in my teeth. I opened the envelope. There were 6 rules, typed on brittle paper. Do not open any grave for any reason. Do not question the dates or names on the headstones. Do not speak to the priest after dark. Never walk the grounds after midnight. If you hear the bell ring, ignore it, especially if it rings at night. Do not attempt to leave before your shift is over. 1 month, no early exits. At first, I laughed. It felt like something out of a low-budget horror movie. But something about the way the papers smelled like old, dirt and formaldehyde made it hard to shrug off. I folded it up, tucked it in the drawer next to the bed, and decided to just get through the first week before bailing. I've had weirder gigs, or so I thought. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet. My job was simple. Walk the perimeter, check that nothing was disturbed, and keep the grass from growing too wild. The strangest thing was how little there was to do. No new graves, no signs of wildlife. No visitors, no funerals. Every grave already had a name, a date, and despite the age of some of the stone states going back to the 1800s, none of them looked weathered. No cracks, no moss, just clean-cut marble and granite, polished and pristine. And the weirdest thing, I never saw a single patch of disturbed earth. No one had dug a grave here in decades, maybe longer, but new names kept appearing. One morning, I woke up and counted 4 fresh headstones that hadn't been there the night before. Same flawless look, same silent air. No truck tracks, no tools, just there. I asked the priest about it. I caught him outside at dusk, feeding the birds that never landed. "They're always here," he said quietly. "Some just take longer to notice." Then he walked inside and closed the church doors behind him. The bell rang on the 5th night. I shot awake in the loft, heart pounding. It was 2:14 a.m. I remember because I checked my watch 3 times. Thinking it must be wrong, the bell tower rope was still. I could see it from my bed. Yet the sound of that bell echoed across the graveyard, deep and slow. Boom, boom. 6 times, then silence. I didn't sleep again that night. On day 7, I saw movement. It was near the far back row of the graveyard where the oldest stones were. Something dark and low was crawling between the headstones. I grabbed the flashlight and ran out, boots crunching dry grass underfoot, breath clouding in the suddenly freezing air. Nothing but there were tracks, not footprints, drag marks. Like someone had pulled a body through the grass. From one grave to another, I followed them until they just stopped. Mid-field, no hole, no ending, just nothing. The priest watched me from the chapel steps the whole time, didn't say a word. By week 2, I stopped sleeping entirely. I'd started hearing voices, whispers in the wind that seemed to say my name. I thought it was stress, sleep deprivation, isolation. But then the names started changing. One night, it whispered James. That was my father's name, dead 5 years. The next night, it whispered Grace, my ex. The 3rd night, you. I stopped walking the grounds after sunset. The 4th rule was starting to feel like more than superstition, but the window in my loft faced the graveyard. I couldn't not look. Every night, I swore I saw movement. Figures, standing by the stones, watching, waiting. Sometimes they pointed. On day 13, I found a gravestone with a name I recognized. Malcolm R. Dwyer, my childhood neighbor. Died in a house fire 20 years ago. It's no reason that name should be here. But there it was. Same pristine stone. Same untouched earth. I ran back to the loft and yanked open the drawer with the rules. There, on the back of the page, was something I hadn't noticed before. Those buried here are not bound by time. The dead do not rest. They remember. They return. I didn't sleep that night either. I started to feel wrong. Like the longer I stayed, the less I belonged to myself. My reflection in the small mirror began to blur around the edges. My thoughts felt like they were being watched. And then on the 15th night, the bell rang again. But this time, I wasn't in the loft. I was outside. It was 11:47 p.m., too close to midnight. I'd gone out for air, convinced I could stay near the building and be safe. But when that bell rang deep, slow, unnatural, I looked up and saw the rope in the tower was moving, but no one was pulling it. Then, something stepped out from behind a gravestone, pale, hollow, draped in tattered cloth. Its mouth stretched open in a silent scream. It pointed to a fresh grave. My flashlight flickered out. I ran. I didn't stop until I was inside the church itself, gasping for air, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing off the stained glass windows. The priest was there. He didn't look surprised. "You've seen too much," he said. Then, softer, "Be careful what you dig up. Some things are buried for a reason." That was 2 weeks ago. I've stayed inside since then. Eat, I sleep, I avoid the window, but every morning I wake up and count the stones. And every morning there's one more. Last night I found one at the very edge of the graveyard. The name, mine. I swear they whisper now. It started on the 16th night. I was lying awake in bed, as usual, staring at the ceiling when I heard it. Faint, at first, like wind rustling dry leaves, but the longer I listened, the more the sounds separated into words, not full sentences, just fragments. Dig, so cold, he watches. I sat up. The window was open a crack, and the graveyard outside looked still. Moonlight pooled across the grass, and for a moment I thought I was imagining things until the whispers grew clearer. They were coming from the headstones. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the loft door. I know what the rules say, but by then, the fear had fomented into obsession. I needed to see. The graveyard air was damp, thick. My boots sank slightly into the wet earth with every step. I followed the voices, or tried to. They seemed to slide around me, never coming from one direction for long. Then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh, barefoot, muddy. They trailed between 3 different graves, looping nonsensically. No exit path, no source. I crouched down and touched the earth, still warm, and that's when I heard it, a low, wet scratching from beneath the soil. I panicked. I know it sounds irrational, but you weren't there. You didn't hear how desperate that sound was, like fingernails on wood, like someone trying to escape. I ran back to the loft, grabbed the rusty shovel from beside the door, and sprinted back down into the dark. I picked the grave where the scratching had been loudest. Marked Thomas Award, 1941. The last 2 digits were never filled in. The dirt was soft. It's too soft. Each scoop brought up clumps that smelled like old rot and iron. I dug faster, heart thudding in my throat. After 15 minutes, I hit wood, the coffin. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to stop. Curiosity had a stronger grip on me than fear. I pried the lid open with the shovel blade empty. No bones. No body. Only claw marks. Deep gouges all along the inside. Splinters scattered like old fingernails. And scratched into the lid were words, "Let me out," over and over. Desperate and crooked, I staggered back, dropped the shovel. Then I looked up and saw my name carved on the headstone beside it. Not Thomas Award. Me. My full name. Same. Engraving style. Same perfect polish. But it hadn't been there earlier. I swear it hadn't. The priest found me at dawn. I was sitting on the church steps, still muddy, shaking, shovel lying in the grass. He didn't ask what I'd done, just stared at me with eyes like empty wells, and muttered, "You've disturbed the order." I opened my mouth to speak, but he shook his head. They were never meant to rest. That's all he said before turning and disappearing back into the church. I haven't seen him since. The whispers haven't stopped. They follow me now inside the loft. Under the floorboards, behind the walls, my name is among them, repeated. Like a chant that's never my voice. It's deeper, guttural, like something remembering me from before I was born. Then the shadows started watching. I see them near the tree line during the day tall, thin silhouettes that don't move. Not even when the wind rushes through the branches. Sometimes there are 3. Sometimes a dozen. Always facing the church. Always silent at night. They're closer. I've spotted them between the headstones, standing perfectly still, heads slightly tilted like dogs trying to understand a new command. I don't leave the loft after dark anymore. I barely move, but I don't sleep either, because the bell rings now. At random hours. Last night it rang at 3:03 a.m. 3 slow tolls. Counted them while crouched under the bed, flashlight off, barely breathing. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, one at a time. I gripped the blanket and waited, heart trying to beat its way out of my ribs. The steps stopped right outside the loft door. Then, scraping. Something dragged its fingers down the wood. How long? Sharp fingers. It didn't knock, didn't speak, just scraped. Then silence. When I opened the door at dawn, the hallway was empty, but etched into the door, in the same jagged handwriting I saw in the coffin, one of us. I tried calling the number that got me hired. No signal. The landline in the church office. Dead. No dial tone. I found the phone cord cut, frayed, and blackened like it had been burned. I even tried writing a note, folding it, and leaving it on the altar. The next morning, it was gone. In its place was a single dead bird, its beak sewn shut with red thread. I don't know if I'm a gravekeeper anymore. I think I'm guarding something. Something ancient, wrong. Something buried not because it died, but because it couldn't. Maybe. The headstones aren't for the dead. Maybe they're labels, warnings, cages, and every time I hear that bell, I think it means one of them got out. I don't remember deciding to go back into the church basement. It was like something pulled me. I hadn't been down there since my first week when the old priest gave me the rules, handed me the jangling set of keys, and warned me never to stay below ground longer than a prayer's breath. That line makes more sense now. but I wish I hadn't ignored it. The stone steps down were colder than usual. Wet, like they'd just been scrubbed with something. Raw. The iron lanterns that lined the wall had gone out, so I used my flashlight, which immediately flickered. The second I crossed the threshold, I noticed the smell again. Damp parchment, decay, a hint of old meat, and that faint humming like a choir warming up. Just below human hearing, the back room was where they kept records, mostly dusty books, half-rotted scrolls, and hand-sketched maps of the graveyard. But one leather-bound tome was sitting open on the table. I didn't leave it that way. The ink was fresh, black, glossy, bleeding into the yellowed paper. My fingers tingled as I flipped through the pages. At first, the names looked normal: births, deaths, dates, priestly signatures. Then came the drawings, sketches of bodies twisted, elongated, wrong, limbs too many, joints that bent the wrong way. Some with no faces, just hollows where the skin was pulled tight over bone. Next to each drawing was a matching grave plot number, and slowly teased something. The plots weren't random. When I laid out the map beside the drawings, the grave placements formed shapes, symbols. Some were circles interlocked with stars. Others looked like ancient sigils binding marks, seals, and worse. Some of the symbols weren't finished yet, but graves had already begun forming them. I hadn't dug them that night. The fog came in early, thick, pressed against the windows of the loft like wet cotton. Even sound got muffled in it. The bell didn't ring, but I swear I heard breathing in the mist, heavy, slow, close. At midnight, I saw him again, the black-robed figure. He moved between the graves like a shadow stretched too far. He didn't carry a lantern, but the fog parted around him like it feared him. His robe dragged through the mud but left no marks. I followed him. I don't know why. Curiosity again? Or maybe something deeper. Something older. He walked beyond the eastern tree line where the graves are oldest, where the earth doesn't feel like earth anymore, just waiting skin. There, in the fog, I saw them, figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, rotting, wet, crawling out of the soil with grotesque slowness, bone creaking, flesh sloughing off. Their heads tilted down in worship. They bowed toward the church, not the priest, not the cross, the church itself. The building seemed to breathe, walls flexing subtly, but groaning like an old stomach. And then the church glowed a sickly red, pulsing from its foundation like a heartbeat underground. That's when I understood. This wasn't a graveyard. It was a prison, and the church wasn't a sanctuary. It was the lock. I turned and ran. I didn't even think my body just moved. Fumbling through fog, slipping on wet stone, but the trees, they bent toward me. Their roots rose from the dirt like fingers trying to trip me. The headstones shifted, rearranging themselves into a spiral I couldn't outrun. Every time I passed one, my name was etched on it. Rest soon, he returns. One must stay. I made it back to the main path, but the church door was gone. Gone, just flat stone where the door used to be. No seams, no handles, like it had never existed. I pounded my fists against it, screamed, sobbed. But the only thing that answered was the ground beneath my feet. It moved, a pulse, a slow inhale, the soil breathing in the bodies. Back in the loft, I tried to burn the grave maps. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could undo something, break the pattern, disrupt the seal, but the pages wouldn't catch fire. They only screamed, a high-pitched hiss, like steam escaping flesh. Then words in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. One must watch, one must feed, one must fall. I haven't seen the priest in days. The bell rings at weirder hours, now 1:11 a.m. 6266, I didn't think that was possible. The fog doesn't leave in daylight. Shadows gather in corners, even when I turn on every light, and I can't leave. I tried once. Packed a bag, ran toward the main road. Took me 2 hours of jogging. When I got there, I was standing back at the front gate, out of breath, bleeding from the nose. And the iron fence had grown taller. Every now and then, the black-robed figure stands just inside the woods, watching, waiting. I think he's me, or maybe who I'll become. This place doesn't need a grad fee, I fears. It needs a warden, someone to keep the ground fed, and something tells me I was never hired. I was summoned. I don't remember sleeping. I don't remember deciding to go back. But when I opened my eyes, I was already walking down the path toward the church. The fog parted for me now, like it knew, like it welcomed me home. The church, if you can even call it that anymore. She changed. The wood groaned and breathed. Windows had melted into the walls like sagging flesh. The steeple tilted at an impossible angle, as if gravity had given up. The bell rang constantly now, a low, bone-deep hum too slow to be human, too perfect to be random. The door didn't open when I touched it. It peeled back, wet wood curling, away like skin, revealing the pulsing red interior. The air inside was hot, thick, and wet, not humid viscous, like breathing through syrup. The walls moved when I blinked, and in the distance, from below the floorboards, I heard chanting. The priest was gone. His quarters were empty. The mirror shattered, the bed scorched. A single, feather black and oily lay where his robe once hung. There were claw marks on the inside. Up his closet. Whatever he'd been hiding from had found him. Or maybe he was never real to begin with. I knew where I had to go. The crypt. The stairs were longer now, curving down, deeper than I'd ever seen. The stone underfoot was warm, like I was walking on a living thing's spine as I descended. The light from my flashlight weakened. It didn't flicker, it just faded, like the darkness was eating it. Eventually, I didn't bother with it. I let the dark guide me at the bottom. I found the tomb room, but not how I remembered it. Gone were the dusty shelves and old scrolls. Now there were rows of coffins, stacked like library books, hundreds, maybe thousands, each one pristine, sealed, etched with a name in deep, red script. I walked along the first row, my fingers trembling as they traced each one. Thomas L. Gray, Gravekeeper, 1871 to 1873. Elias M. Ward, Gravekeeper, 1904 to 1906. Marina Cole, Gravekeeper, 1959 to 1961, all the way to the most recent one, Father Edwin Halberd, Gravekeeper. 1998 to 2023, he wasn't the priest. He was just the last guy they tricked, and now his name had joined the rest. But there was one more coffin, right at the center. Alone, open, empty, and the name. It wasn't etched dot, it was carved violently, desperately. Over and over again, my name. I ran, or tried to, but the air got heavier with every step. My thoughts slowed, slurring in my head like syrup in a cracked jar. The stone hallway seemed to loop back on itself, every turn leading back to the altar. God help me, I wish I never saw it. It stood in the center of the room, made entirely of bones. Human mostly, though some were too long, too flat, too wrong. The altar pulsed like it had a heartbeat, and below it, something shifted. It woke up. A sound came from the floor. Not a scream, but a whimper, like a child crying from beneath a coffin lid. Then the stone beneath the altar cracked open, and the stench hit me. Rot, blood, fire, and something ancient, like time itself had spoiled. In the exposed pit beneath the altar, I saw myself, or something that used to be me, a corpse stitched to the wall with thorns and wire. Eyes wide, lips sewn into a silent scream. Around its neck, my crucifix, broken. Its hands twitched, not in pain, in ritual. It was performing something. That's when I saw the words, painted across the altar in dried blood. Final shift, 6/14. The grave closes. Okay. I tried to back away, but the ground opened beneath me. No dash, it ate me. Hands, dozens of them, shot up from the dirt. Skeletal fingers pulling at my ankles, my wrists, my mouth. They didn't just hold me, they buried me, dragging me into the floor. I screamed, but dirt poured into my throat. I clawed at the surface, but only scratched my own name over and over again. And then, I remembered everything. I wasn't hired to be a gravekeeper. I was summoned. There was never a job, never a paycheck, never an interview, just the cycle, the ritual. One gravekeeper to feed the lock, one body to keep the church from opening, one soul to bind the others in place as I sank into the soil. The other coffins opened, one by one. The former keepers stepped out blind, boneless, twitching like broken marionettes. Their mouths gaped silently, eternally mouthing the same words. No one is truly buried. No one ever dies. I don't know how long I've been here. There's no time, just shifts, endless shifts. I can feel the roots growing through my rib cage now. I can hear the bells through the dirt, still ringing at the wrong hours, still calling another dot, another fool, another soul. The fog will find them soon. It always does. The door will open, and when they enter, I'll be the one watching from the tree. Line, because I am the last grave, dot, and the ground must be kept.